Good evening. It being on or after 7 o'clock, I'm going to open up the November 13th meeting of the Georgetown Conservation Commission. And on the agenda this evening, we have 3 hearings, and we have a request for a modification for the turf field and some other business items to address. And I'd like to start off with the request for the modification of the turf field. If I could have the applicant or representative, and if you could explain what the request is for us, please.
Evening, my name is John Pingree. I'm with the Synthetic Turf Advisory Committee and GAA. Basically, what we're doing is a slight movement of the scoreboard. I'm not sure if Steve had all the stuff, if he gave you copies of it, but I have the plans here that show, if you guys have them or not.
love to
You're
have a
welcome to look. This shows them both in place. Here's where it is, and here's where we want to move it to. And this kind of shows the original where it was, and we're basically moving it just back into the parking lot, because it's a sightline thing from the field. When we got out there and we looked at it, it needed to be turned a little bit more, and we couldn't really do it from the location we had, so it had to be moved back. If you look at those plans, it's back toward the parking lot. This will show, if you want to look at it too. I'll give you this. This is the original plan, and we're trying to move it back just ever so slightly over here. So here's where it sits in the original plan that you had.
So
And
it'll be farther from Pembroke,
It's moving,
or just,
it's moving toward the parking lot.
yeah, same distance from the creek, though?
It's probably, on the design, it might be a foot closer. I don't have an exact measurement on that, but if you look at it, you can see them superimposed there, one versus the other. So it is slightly closer, I think, if I look at it. It's taken, the one you're looking at over there has it, the original one, so it's a
about, I think it's about 10 feet.
Closer?
No, it's about 10 feet from the resource.
Oh,
So it was close to begin with anyway.
Right.
Based
It was-
on the-
Exactly, it was close to begin with.
the scoreboard, it's concrete buried in the ground? and
Correct. You have 2 4x6 concrete posts on these sides, and you have steel I-beams coming out of them to hold the scoreboard. So that's basically, I have the construction, if you want to look at the construction document for the bases.
It's like, 5 by 10 or something like that, or?
Or 6x4, I believe.
But it's not solid along the ground, it's
No,
just the
it's-
footings that
Right,
go
it's-
up.
exactly.
Right.
So you're putting these steel I-beams into the footings, and then the scoreboard hangs off the footings.
Yep.
But you're taking up a parking place by doing that.
We're not gonna lose a parking spot. There's
Looks
gonna
like you
be,
are.
it says we're losing one.
Looks like it.
It's gonna be right over, close to the, if you look at that, it looks like there's a porta potties there, actually. It's gonna be real close to those. We had to,
Parking is not our purview, so.
it is gonna be close to those porta potties. We had to put those in because of, for whatever reason, building inspector said we needed some kind of porta potty, so that's what we're gonna do. So those are gonna go there too.
So what's being asked of the commission is whether we feel this is a minor modification or a modification significant enough to warrant a change to the whole plan. And basically, you have to modify the whole hearing process.
I'm not an engineer, but from the way it sounds and looks, I think it's kind of minor. I know it's moving it, but it's really
Yeah.
no closer.
Right,
maybe
we're
a foot
hoping you'll
closer
say
to
it's
the
a minor
resource.
change and we can go ahead and do it without reopening the whole hearing and going through the process. I mean, that's what we're asking for, that relief.
So it requires the commission to take a formal vote, whether we feel it's minor. Again, if you don't feel it's minor, and you feel it's significant, and usually significant is a real significant change to the whole site plan, some major changes. It's very often, things get
The whole
skewed
dynamics
slightly,
change.
right, moved around slightly without that being a major modification, especially on a big plan. I mean, if it was just, if the whole hearing was about something right there, and that was it, but this is a much larger project, and this is small in the big picture.
Yeah.
Comments?
Seems pretty minor to me.
I'll entertain a motion if anyone would like to make one.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to determine the proposed removal of the scoreboard for the turf field as a minor amendment to the original plan.
minor amendment or minor
What should I call
modification.
it? Modification, thank you, to the original application.
Second.
There's a motion, a second, to consider the requested modification to the turf field, a minor modification for the scoreboard. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? Thank you, so be it. Yeah, yes. All right. It, being on or after 7 o'clock, I'm going to reopen the notice of intent for East Main Street, GCC 2014-09, the Georgetown East Main Street Skate Park project, including the construction of the gravel road, parking lot, concrete skate park, gravel dog park, and Pony League ball field, et cetera, et cetera. If I could have the applicant and/or consultant, if you could identify yourself, please.
James Demento, Chairman, Park and Rec.
Thank you. All right. We did receive some information as far as,
It's scattered. So you got the donation agreement,
yes,
which, when I went, after our meeting, we went to talk to the lawyers about getting the title search and everything done. He wanted, before he spent the money for that, he wanted a donation agreement, which we had the lawyers write up, and I faxed down to Jim Bussing, who's in Florida. And the first one, he was concerned because there was a lot in there where he would have to pay money for a donation, so he got a lawyer, and they reviewed it, and they made some adjustments, and then they got a copy that he signed, and then I had the lawyer send a letter saying that he looked it over and it was okay, and if you wanted to sign it, because Steve's not here till the 18th, that, you know, he felt it.
yeah, it appears, and I've got some notes, town council did review this.
Right. So now we can go and get the title searched and all that work done. It is,
But for the town to accept land, it has to, in this situation, it's my understanding that both the commission and the board of selectmen would have to both
okay, yeah, fine.
approve it.
Yeah.
So, I don't think the other commissioners have had really a chance to look at it, so I will let them. Susan, you don't happen to have any more copies of this? Oh, you can take a look at it.
The other thing is I got a estimate from LEC, I believe. I don't have my stuff, I left it at work. The LEC for a proposal for a water resource study, which was another request.
LSP, was it?
No, I believe it's LEC. Shillman, I think he has a copy of it.
Why, a water resource study
There was
of
a-
what?
One of the mitigation was, go ahead, yeah, go ahead.
Use of the ponds, I think.
Right, to look at the ponds, we had a discussion whether they should be or would harm them to connect them, et cetera.
Right, gotcha.
And,
Right,
Kind
so
of
I
the status.
asked them to do a scope of work. It was just one person that was recommended for Gail to look at who does that. I'm not sure if the scope of work is as complete as you want, but I was hoping, I had that to Steve a week ago, week and a half, so I was hoping they would have thrown it in your packets, or,
actually, you can take a look at that associated with that
he
document.
mentioned to me, we had talked about my letter, there was a thing on putting a silt sock. He didn't think a silt sock was necessary. There might be other choices. My only reservation against that, the one time I did see a turtle go into those retention ponds, for some reason it was working hard to get under the fence. I don't know if they smell water or whatever, so, whatever, it was trying to get under that fence, then there was water in that retention pond, so
Where,
whatever you do, it should,
where are we now?
Oh,
We're
I'm
at West
sorry.
Street now.
West Street, yeah, I mean,
And is that big?
yes, they slide down the blacks, and there was 3 or 4 of them in
Yeah.
there.
A few years ago, we put telephone poles or logs or whatever along the bottom of that to try and
Yeah,
deter
I
them,
mean-
and they still got in.
Well, I think they smell the water. The one I
Yeah.
observed, they really want to get to that
Yeah.
source, because I think they're trying to get back to a water source, and they confuse that with the swamp, and so I'm just saying, putting another fence up there, they're still gonna work for 10 minutes trying to get underneath it, so I only recommended the sock because it might be something they can't climb over. All I'm saying is whatever you come up with, it's like having a dog, it's gonna find a way to get underneath the fence, you know, so. But he suggested that a sock may not be the appropriate, but there should be something, and I told him we'd take care of it, whatever the conservation decided was necessary, and the water department agreed upon, that's all. And Lou said he thought he had the authority to make those decisions as far as what was necessary.
Yeah, I was just looking at your letter, Jim, dated 11/5, referencing the activities, and I'm wondering if we can't tighten up some of the language. We will try and push.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean,
I'd like to see that a little more.
yeah, can you read me that line?
It says,
'Cause we're
Park and Rec will try and push as much off of West Street for the nesting months, 10 to 28.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
It's
kinda-
just for the following, right, we will, I mean, as soon as we ended that meeting, we had the meeting with the GA, the water department. According to the GA, and then we had the GA at the Park and Rec meeting, next spring is gonna be horrendous for games and stuff. And he said,
Yeah.
the following years, he thinks he can work the issues, it's just.
Well, that's what I'm kind of driving at, is to come up with something realistic and then try and, just like in any
Yeah.
other organization, try and if we set a nebulous kind of like, well, we'll try and do something, we all end up not doing much, so.
Well, I think if you read that, it says, next year, we're saying we'll do the best, but the following year, we'll be off by 6:30. As long as with the two assumptions that the turf field gets finished, which we know is probably gonna happen now, because it's done, and we get the Pembroke fields back online. And the only reason I put 6:30, 6 o'clock is I didn't wanna have a game 5 to 6 and have it go into overtime and not be able to have them play or something, or, so. What happens right now is the 3 to 6-year-old, 3 to 6 is for the young kids. That seems to be a time slot that's more, they can push the kids, they'll be able to push the adult kids over to the turf field at night. But young kids aren't playing sports at 7, 8, 9 o'clock. So they really felt, at least next year, that.
Yeah, I hear you on that, but.
Yeah, okay.
What I'm trying to say is like, committal, the committal more is like the 2016 of some of these things, so.
I mean, if we could word it that will be the last place we schedule, I mean, you know, when we look at all other places are fill, that's the last resource we look at, you know, for some of those hours, but remember, that's 3 fields, it's a big portion of especially with Pembroke being down. Yeah. I'm not against anything, like I said, I just know that they were, you know, once again, the water department and the GAA are I'm the scheduling authority, and the water department said I could schedule things differently,
Right.
but, I mean,
Does everyone have a copy of this or not? This is Jim's letter?
Yes. I think we talked the last meeting, though, we were thinking like from 4 o'clock to 9 AM or
Right,
something,
they-
right?
right, they originally said that they thought a 4 to 9, but they said dusk was more important because the turtles come out during the night.
Okay.
So they said, you know, so I, knowing 4 to 6 was really what the GA was definitely needed, I gave it from 6 to 6:30 just because, like I said, games could get delayed, refs could be late, and it gives us that extra half hour to get off the field. But like I said, it does get us off from 6:30 to 9.
So any other comments on what we've discussed in terms of the mitigation?
Well, like you, I'm worried about the word try.
We just tried for next year, it wasn't the following years.
Okay,
It was,
so this A and B, that's a solid commitment based on have to be open and usable for a season. So you're saying, does that mean that you want to use them for a year and and find out how much they're used?
This was cut and pasted off the GA's letter to us through the, saying that they felt in order to change all the scheduling, and that they would have to, they wanted to be on the turf field and see how much they can schedule it, because remember, they're getting on the field when the school committee gets off the field. So they're gonna write up new scheduling, times based on that. And if everything works out, but yeah, that was their concerns, was,
So that, I guess I'm just concerned that this is going to push back to 2017 based on this language that says they want to use it for a season to see how it
tell you
goes.
what, I'd be willing to say, putting a line there that this 2016 will be the end no matter what, you know, so
I mean, I'd
if those
rather
things
look-
aren't done by 2016, then that will fall on us to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see kind of that committal. I mean, if there's a extenuating circumstances, you can always come
Yeah.
back and revisit it, but it sounds like 2015 is kind of a transitional year.
Right.
And there's no way, you know, because things are just coming online or not fully online, and there's no way, you know, anyone can really lock down those things in that year.
We could put, once these two milestones are reached, or 2016 is attained, or something like that, or or by the year 2016.
Well,
that-
when is the turf field coming online?
It's gonna come on this spring. It's on, theoretically, it's gonna be on in December, but there'll be snow, but the biggest thing is the Pembroke fields and what's gonna happen, how long they're gonna come online.
So does that mean that B means this spring, 2015?
Hello?
2015, B will be,
Where are you?
B will be, should be full swing. It's A is the issue.
So B, the turf field, has to be open and use for a season.
And-
That's the spring 2015 season.
Yeah. So that won't be a problem for
Yeah, if you
2016.
can come down here, go ahead, come on. Yes,
Okay.
thanks.
And when is Pembroke the field scheduled to be?
Yeah, you got me on that one, 100%. This may not happen till spring of 2000, so it says 100% of Pembroke Field old and new. This may not happen to the year 2016, but my commitment will be that we will not have a year scheduling, and that we'll have to make it happen no matter what.
Okay, I guess, Jim,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So there will be no, well, to put it so, we'll have to come back to you with explanation why. I mean, which is, you know, I mean,
That's okay,
you know.
even from my perspective, but I'd kind of like to see
So
some.
it'll be on the record that we have to, you know, those times until, and if we, for some reason, something drastic happens, we'll have to come back and convince you that we can't do that. You know, but I'm saying that's, at the,
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, obviously, there could be extenuating circumstance, but again, I'd rather see something more committal as far as a date, and if there's a good reason why they can't, other than just, you know, nobody wants to do it. If we leave it in a nebulous way, you know, it just may not happen.
right. I agree with you entirely, and that, just because we don't want to, or it's inconvenient,
they'll
I
put the
think that
ball
it
in your
would
court.
it would have to be something,
Right, that'd be put the ball in,
Giant.
that'd be put the ball in your court ultimately, instead of ours, which is.
what do you think about the 6:30? Carl, because we did originally ask for 4.
Is that a critical time between 4 and 6? Is that why we looked for that? I don't know. Turtles. Are they traveling at,
They're very skittish. They do, if they're traveling to the fields and there is people there, they'll turn around and go back.
yeah,
But my understanding is it's more towards dusk. I don't know if in June if 6 is dusk or more 7. I mean, I don't have that, but I did go online and check. They say they're very skittish, so.
I mean, I mean, 4 is the theoretical ultimate. I mean, I guess I'm trying to come up with a happy compromise between usability and, protection of resources. And, it may not be ideal for both, but both sides have to give a little bit, I think.
I agree. And this is exactly the issue. They are very skittish, and a few have been chased off their nests this year because of the activity down there. And they go and they're not seen again. So
Yeah, I agree.
that's a
I'm
real
not-
concern.
Yeah,
But I agree with you as well. And I think it's species specific. The Blandings, who
Right.
are the primary ones that we're concerned about, really are more late nesters rather than the earlier nesters. If we were still concerned about spotted turtles, which it would be nice to be concerned about them, they are earlier nesters, but I guess we're thinking about the Blandings primarily, and they prefer later.
yeah.
I can offer, I just looked up the sunrise and sunset for June of this year. The beginning of June, it was 8:15 p.m. And the end of June, it's 8:26 p.m.
I mean, once you get, I mean, in the May, June timeframe, I mean, 4 o'clock, it's very bright out still. It's
That's
actually,
true.
I mean, in fact, turtles, I mean, probably don't like to come out at that point because it can be, fairly warm.
Right,
And they're not gonna wanna hang out too much in the direct sun,
right.
especially in terms of a nesting mode,
Mm-hmm.
because, for predation too.
Mm-hmm, exactly. All right, so I'm okay with 6:30. Especially as you say, you're not going to be actually scheduling past 6. You're
Right.
just allowing a buffer in case,
Late refs, game
Yeah.
gets in, yeah, exactly.
okay.
So I guess my question is, we've got the letter, I'm just trying to wrap my hands around all the mitigation, so we can make sure we capture it and document it and have it as part of the order. And then we have the agreement for Mr. Bussing. And I don't know if the documentation made its way down to Laura here. Do you have the actual contract for that? Yeah, let me,
This isn't a final document, right? This one?
yeah,
That we were just talking about, where it says we'll try to push as much off West Street, et cetera. That isn't the final document.
No,
this one.
that's what he questioned, is we talked about changing number 8, based on that, once the 2 milestones are reached, or by the year 2016, because he said he's questioned the try.
Okay.
Because of that same line, I guess, is what jumped out.
Mr. Chairman?
the gentleman in the back with a hand up.
Haven't like to say it's the planning board, just a question,
Hello.
much the same as
Did
when,
you turn on your
the
TV?
planning board gets something, a document. Basically, what usually is, the rule is that the final decision, final conditions that the board writes is the ruling document. So, any little things that you may not like in that submission can be squared up when you condition.
That's what we're
Specify
talking
in
about.
your condition.
That's what we're
Let's-
talking about.
well, we just want to make sure we capture everything and have the correct conditions and there's agreement. Let's take a look at that.
Oh,
So, just so you know, everything is, except on line 8, it will say, oh, by the year 2016. Well, I'm just, so he, as he's reading it.
okay. Yeah, well, then,
I agree that we wanted the backfield hayed? I can't remember that. I mean, I know it was proposed, but
Well, I
We
think you
were-
want it once or twice a year
Yeah, I think so, I think.
to keep down the.
Right, so,
keep down the saplings? I'm sorry.
no, so that used to be, that used to be hayed, by someone who needed hay many years ago. And we're talking 1980s, 1990s, early 1990s, and it stopped being hayed. The water department isn't, a little bit nervous about my interaction with hay in the field because I'm the park and rec, but the agreement is if they want the field hayed and you can get them to agree to hay it, we'll do it and and do it as many times as you want. There's still a little bit of an open issue about whether they want to have it done, although there's some members who do. Think it's no problem. It's an open field. It helps, I'm just saying that we don't control that land.
Correct.
So we're saying if
If they're amenable to it.
they're amenable to it, we'll do any height, any, and I think it'd be useful to have it was done before and it worked. It keeps the ticks away from the other field, which we haven't had any problems with yet, so.
Well, eventually, I mean, as the brush grows in, it's gonna be just a woodland.
I guess my question is the word hay. Do you mean plant hay, or do you mean just
No,
mow
just-
it?
No,
just-
just.
Okay.
In the old days, actually, in the old days,
Okay.
the old days, they used to hay the field. They cut it for hay and someone used it for bedding for their
understand.
horses.
Sure.
Right.
Because it was free and they needed
But
some.
basically, you have the grassland, then you have the really the brush grow up and the saplings, and
Right.
in a 20-year period, you can have a field go completely back to a.
I agree. I
saplings
just
growing.
didn't know if
Dense
we were
woodland.
planning on actual planting hay and baling hay back there. Because it says
Hence the
hay.
turtles, hence the turtles thing.
But I think I said something about as conditioned by the water. If the water department can, if you guys can convince the water department to do it, we'll pay for it and do it.
Okay. Would it be,
So, I mean, we can actually, take these items that Jim has listed here, what we want, and actually make these as the conditions in the
great.
Yeah.
Can we say mow the backfield?
They
Or
didn't
is that
want, they didn't want us to mow, because the mowing means grass.
a
Well, right,
maintenance?
if you say mow, you want to say it at a maximum height or minimum height. What they were concerned, I was gonna say mow, and I was gonna
We're
cut
not making a
it.
golf course out there.
Right.
That's what they were concerned with. So
No.
if you use the word mow, you want to get a minimum, maximum height level, because that's what they're concerned. That's why I use the word hay.
Yeah, I mean, normally we're talking, 4 or 5 inches.
Right, so- I don't think they have a problem, just be careful in the wording, that's all.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
You do know that's almost entirely poison ivy.
Well, it wasn't,
I don't want to be the one mowing it.
well, it wasn't
That's
it wasn't
hideous.
15 years ago, but I haven't been out there. And,
It's
yeah,
pretty horrible.
well, we can always get some goats out there. Maybe that's the thing. to do.
Great
All
idea.
right.
Oh, I know somebody who has
Let's
some
go.
goats for sale. Okay.
Hey, is there a gate, like, after the park closes, 6:30, is there a gate that keeps people from coming on
there
with
is-
their dogs and whatever?
There is a gate. People park and get around the gate. But there is a gate.
Yeah. I mean, we close it down for scheduled sports, but then anybody can go in after that, and,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I didn't know if that could be locked, or a
oh,
sign.
it's closed and sometimes it's mostly locked. I'm not saying it's locked perfectly, but
Yeah.
we could be more diligent that month. But yeah, we don't want because we've had kids go in their jeeps and drive around the
Right,
field, right? So we
right.
try to lock it, but ultimately it's done by the last person using the field, the
Mhm.
GA.
Yeah.
That's an option.
So what's our next step?
Well, I mean, the next step is to determine whether we've satisfied with these conditions. The plan is essentially set. Are these conditions acceptable? We've tweaked them here, and if that's acceptable to the commission, we can so order this notice of intent, and then we need to make a determination whether we are signing this agreement, the donation agreement, and we should do that as a commission, obviously.
I'm sorry, I didn't read the letter from town council. Did they say yes or no?
Actually, just read the comment right there,
Oh, okay. Thank you. The yellow.
the yellow.
I have a
They
comment.
do.
Steve and I were just talking other ways that we could keep the turtles out of this detention pond. And I said, well, 'cause this gate, he said they were coming in through the gate or under the gate.
And to-
And he said, that it's not used that heavily, it's only used a couple of times a year. So we were thinking that maybe we could have a hinge that came down, in the direction, so if the turtles were coming this way, the hinge would come down this way. So they would just be pushing it, like making it tighter. And then you could flip the hinge up because it's on a slope like this. So, you know, you'd have to flip it high enough that it could clear that when it's open and then fold it back down when it's closed. And have some, I was thinking like a hard rubber or something, but something like that.
That's possible.
So we could just word that loosely to say that we're looking for a solution to
Right,
keep them
and when
out
the
there.
solution is determined,
So,
a reasonable solution is determined, then. No.
so is the wording close enough for us to accept it, or do we want to,
I think it is. I mean, it's,
If not, we can work it, you know, I mean, it's work in progress. That's how we usually work with Steve.
I guess I'm a little concerned that there are a couple of, important modifications.
well, we, in other
We don't
words,
want the word try.
no, we can eliminate that right now.
Right.
In other
Oh,
words,
okay.
in other words, as part of a motion, you can literally say, one, no, read it, 2, 3, 4, 5, make the change. That becomes the part of the order,
Okay,
and the commission can so vote on that in the motion. So, yeah, you can, Park and Rec agrees to,
Yeah. So we move try to push, make a and add, move try to push on line item 7 and add. on line-
otherwise you'd have to, make modifications to this letter and have Jim go back and type it up again, and then we'd have to come back to another hearing to.
I agree. That's my question.
So I don't think that's necessary. I think we can,
Okay,
we can modify these statements as actual conditions in the record on the order.
okay.
So you agree the best way to do it would probably just remove try to push on line item 7 and add line item 8. Once these two milestones are reached, or by the year 2016, we would be willing to restrict the fields. I think that's the easiest way, but, so I just, that makes he wanted the 2016 commitment, right, so.
Do we want to modify 4? Because we're still looking for a solution. We don't have,
Well, again, this what I would defer to, that could be, a decision could be made by the agent,
okay,
as we do in many cases.
okay, so
in the
agrees
field.
to work with the agent to
Right.
find,
Right.
find a solution to keep the turtles out of the retention pond. To, is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Turtle access to
I mean, you could put by silt sock or other alternatives, methods, and you could phrase it that way. That gives us the option to come up with a better solution.
Okay, that's much better. Other methods. Thanks for adding the mowing between 11 and 2. I don't remember us talking about that, but that's really a good
Yeah, 'cause
amendment.
I won't tell you why. I mean, I think turtles have been damaged because they haven't done that.
Uh-huh.
So
Thank
let's-
you.
Let's just leave it at that. That's something that shouldn't have had to been on the list, should have been just done.
So would number 7 say Park and Rec will push activities off West Street for the nesting month?
We'll push as much off West, well, push off West, push off.
Minimize.
Pardon?
Minimize. Just an alternate word.
Yes, okay. How about will minimize, thank you. Activity on West Street for the nesting month,
Yep, yep.
2015. Sorry.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
that's fine, yep.
And on number 8, it just said we will be willing to, we just put will restrict, So it's just more of a committal at that point, but once everything's online. Any other comments? It's gonna be a doozy of a motion.
Phew.
Can you go slow? I wanna make sure I get everything.
Pardon?
So you go slowly, I wanna make sure I get everything.
Okay. Do you have it?
Do I have what?
You can't make it, can you?
I typically don't.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, wait a minute, what are we moving?
Well,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Accepting.
Where
The
are we
NOI.
accepting the NOI?
Yes,
We are?
I believe we are.
Okay.
the only question is, that I have is, the land donation is part of this. So the commission needs to make a determination whether it wants to sign
Okay,
this. Because this is part of the mitigation.
right. And I forget what was involved in that land, that
Landing
parcel.
turtles to the.
Planting
side.
turtles habitat, the.
Documented, we know they like it
Oh, they're
there?
right down. yeah.
They are, right
It's
there?
Actually,
At East Main
right,
Street?
it's right near the habitat that we're modifying.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm confused. I was thinking that it was a parcel next to the park, but no, this is the
No.
one up by Hampshire Woods.
Hampshire Woods.
Super lovely, got it.
Yes. Very good mitigation.
I'm old, I forget things. So what do you think, Carl? Is that, that letter from town council, that sentence I squared there says it's our decision. And we just agree to talk to him about it.
Well, it sounds like Mr. Bussing, before he proceeds further, he wants committal from
Okay,
the town in that sense. Am I?
No, it was Mike Farrell, before he committed us, CPC, to spend money to do the title search and all the research. He wanted to make sure that if they find out that there's more upland, because it was a question of whether it was a buildable lot, if that was, that he wouldn't backtrack, and he said that's absurd, he wouldn't backtrack, but if the town wanted to spend money and write up an agreement, he would do that. And they presented it to him, and then he questioned why, not only is it absurd, but they're making me get a lawyer to check it, because I'm donating, which he did, and then he signed it. So it's really was to protect the town's money in case, and I guess you're right, if he was a dishonest person and you find out that he found out he had more land there or upland, he said, oh, I got a buildable lot. Well, maybe I won't do that then. But, he seemed to be a man of his word. But,
There was one other piece of mitigation I thought we had talked about, on the other parcel, that
yeah,
about 100-foot setback or something? Did we-
I
Where
sensed.
do we leave that? I'm trying to think.
I sent Steve the mitigation map, and he said he didn't think he didn't want to use it at this point. He thought it was still a parcel to be used on Martell Way,
Martell Way.
yeah.
And I think we need to town meeting? Talk
Yeah,
about
there was a
that?
talk about a town meeting to have to approve this transfer of land from, and he just, he looked at it and he said, well, I don't think it's necessary. I thought he had talked to you about that, but,
Well, I think the land over at, right on the line is good mitigation. It's right there.
Mhm.
They're all around there, all,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we have the land up by the actual turtle nesting fields, then we have the pond habitat study. That's really valuable, that could really increase the value of those ponds and the habitat value of them really well. And does this really mean trial maintenance plan, or did you mean trail maintenance plan?
trail, did I write that?
Thank you.
Spell check doesn't
It
find it when
says
you.
trial, no, it thinks trial is perfectly fine. Trail maintenance plan, okay. As outlined by the Conservation Commission, so would we
That
need
would-
to,
Trail maintenance plan for East Main Street, of course. I mean, that's on, when they,
so would we need to say explicitly to be worked out with the with the agent or the Conservation Commission at a later date?
I would think so.
Yeah, okay. And so, just let me run this by you. Park and Rec will buy silt sock or other methods to deter turtle access to the detention pond. Water Department will make sure it's installed during the turtle nesting season. Prior to, because we don't want them installing it during turtle nesting season, right? Okay. Park and Rec will require mowing 11 to 2 during the nesting month. Park and Rec will hay the backfield up to 3 times per year under the direction of the Water Department with the intent of increasing the survival rate of Blandings turtles. Park and Rec will minimize activity on West Street fields for the nesting month, 2015. Solid commit, then what happens? Are we still doing the solid commitments?
Yeah.
Thing after that? Okay, Park and Rec agrees solid commitments based on the following. 100% of Pembroke fields, old and new, have to be open and usable for a season, so GAA and the school can determine use and availability. Was that what we wanted there?
What would the activity be in the month, the nesting period? It just says minimize. What would that mean?
well, it's just what she's saying, if people are on West Street and yet the synthetic turf field is open, it means pushing as much off as we can. So in other words, you don't have an empty school field when West Street's being utilized. Try to push as much off to other fields, utilize other fields, make that a last resort field. Because next year, every field's gonna be
Right.
used up,
And as I said,
because of Pembroke's down and,
2015 is a transitional year, and
but we'll do the best to push all the games off it as much as possible to other fields that we have. We have a list of all the fields, and they basically go through and say, this game, Little's Hill here, and American Legion here, and, you know. But now we won't have the 5 fields at Pembroke next year, so it just becomes soccer, lacrosse, baseball, different age groups, and then you got girls and boys. There's a lot going on. It's a busy month for the GAA, so.
you know, I mean, I think we have to accept that this, you know, this is a transitional, and new facilities are coming online. It's hard to draw a line in the sand until you know how things are really gonna play out. And that,
Do you mean where turtles are gonna be? I mean,
No, in terms of scheduling, in terms of how everything will work with the new fields and how effectively they are and how they can juggle the different teams around and minimize that use. I mean, that can't happen overnight. I mean, really, it really
Right.
can't. I mean, if everything was open, you could do that.
Right.
But since it's not, you have to have a transitional period.
Where do they anticipate turtles being in relationship to the playfields?
On them.
On them?
Well, usually they'll put, move the nests, actually, or actually cage them. So kids can't run them over, while they're running on.
But while the turtles are actually nesting, we don't
But
cage them.
yeah, the turtle guy goes out there.
You know, we don't cage them while they're nesting.
You have to find that,
The trouble is that,
you have to find the turtle nest and then, once the turtle lays the eggs and then protect it after,
Exactly.
or move it.
but
Yeah.
while they're actually running around on the field, you can't.
Yeah, and if
No,
you try and
no.
relocate the turtle at that point, then they take off and go.
So, do I understand that you're saying you'll minimize it for spring 2015, but you've agreed that from spring 2016, you will make it so the fields are not used after 6:30?
Yeah.
So we don't need these two conditions, A and B, because regardless of whether they've been met,
Okay,
okay?
that's fine.
Is that all right, Jim?
Yep, yep.
All right, thank you.
6:30,
Yes.
as in June 30th, or 6:30 PM?
6:30
PM to 9 AM in the morning.
So it's,
What difference does that make if there's nests out there?
that's when the turtles, you're trying to minimize the activity when the turtles are actually coming out of the water and walking up on the land. Otherwise, they get scared off and they head somewhere else. Or get injured while they're up there. I mean, if you've got both activities at the same time when they're out moving around, whether a truck hits the turtle or a kid jumps on the turtle, the end result is the same.
Or they're scared off their nest while they're
Digging it.
digging and laying.
So I think that's reasonable.
Okay. So, Jim has agreed that this will be a transitional year, spring 2015, and then from spring 2016, that's it. Regardless of A and B conditions.
Yeah, I mean, in any case, from my perspective, if there are extenuating circumstances, we can always have a discussion.
Right, we can.
It's not like,
Yeah.
we can't talk.
Yeah.
So, this will say Park and Rec will minimize activity on West Street for the nesting month, May 30th, June 28th, 2015, from May 30th to 16. Activity will be restricted from the field. No, the field will be a no-use field after 6:30 PM,
Starting in 2000.
starting in 2016. Yeah?
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that the way it goes?
Yeah, I mean, that obviously assumes that the other fields are online, I mean, obviously.
Right.
Can I so move that, as she stated, or?
Yeah, I mean, this is really what we're doing is just crafting the language for the motion right now.
Right, okay.
Since it's kind of gonna be a long motion.
Can you just read it through that once, so I make sure I've captured it all?
Okay, are you making a motion and I'll read the things? You don't want to be responsible?
I would love to be, but I got here late.
Okay. Mr. Chairman,
And just a point of fact regarding Mullen rule. I'm not sure, Lilibeth, I'm not sure you can vote even on this because you've missed a number of hearings. So we still have a quorum either way. You could abstain. But I think you've missed more than several hearings on this particular case.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the NOI for East Main Street Park. GCC 2014-9, DEP 1610783. With the following conditions. That there will be a donation of land outlined in the donation agreement, depicted as parcel A in that document. That a pond habitat study for the East Main Street Pond will be conducted with what does this mean? With appropriate amendments?
I said C amendment, did it say C amendment? Huh.
It says see attached with
Well, I
appropriate
thought
amendments.
you'd amend the scope of that study, so I said with appropriate amendments, appropriate amendments to said study.
Oh,
'Cause you're gonna read- I
from
thought you'd
this
read it.
evening.
There's actually a proposal, LAC proposal that had certain scope in it.
I'm sorry, pardon?
There's
Yeah,
an
actually, I think I did see it too.
There's an LAC proposal, which is the scope of work, which is the,
I see.
so I thought you would amend it with appropriate amendments to the pond.
Are there any amendments to that scope of work?
When I read it, I didn't have any per se.
Okay, so,
I think Susan
upon-
sent that out about a week ago, I think.
all right, yep. I would have read it if I thought we had had a meeting. A pond habitat study will be conducted for the East Main Street ponds according to the scope of work submitted by LEC.
Okay.
All right. A trail maintenance plan will be developed to be determined with the commission at a later date. With regard to West Street, Park and Rec will buy silt sock or other methods to deter turtle access to the detention pond. The water department will install it prior to the turtle nesting season 2015.
I'd say we'll buy silt socks or utilize other methods. I don't know,
Well, that means they either have to buy silt sock or I would like, if they're offering to purchase, what other methods are going to work,
You could
whether
rent for a
it's
month.
silt sock or not.
If you had a silk sock, you could either buy it, use it every year, or rent it every year.
What would you like to say there?
no, I mean, I was just adding utilize. You would just, because I think if you read it
Could we
again,
just say provide, as they did?
that's fine.
Will provide silt sock or other methods, etc. Okay. Park and Rec will require mowing from 11 to 2 during the nesting month, May 30th to June 28th. Park and Rec will hay the backfield up to 3 times per year under the direction of the Water Department with the intent of increasing the survival rate of Blanding's turtles. Park and Rec will minimize activity on West Street fields for the nesting month, May 30th, June 28th, 2015. From spring, wait a minute, from the nesting starting from May 30th, 2016, Park and Rec will restrict field usage at West Street to no field use after 6:30 p.m. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
We have a motion, and it's been seconded, and I'm not gonna reread it all. Is there any further discussion? Does the commission wanna make this agreement part of that motion?
I'm sorry, which agreement? That.
The land, what are we calling it here?
Donation.
The local land donation agreement.
Okay, so the Conservation Commission agrees to accept the land donation of parcel A on the donation agreement. Is that clear enough?
Second.
I don't think you need, well,
You might wanna
can
put-
re-second it.
You might want to put and recommend to selectmen to sign, because they're gonna have to sign it.
Right.
Okay. With the selectmen's approval. Is that what I needed to say?
Or, yeah,
Sign off.
contingent on the selectmen's.
Contingent on selectmen's,
approval.
thanks, Jim. field use after, sorry, contingent on selectmen approval.
Right, ultimately, we both have to sign it.
Do we need to?
Well, actually, that was kind of a modification of the motion, so you can re-second it.
Okay.
I resecond, if necessary.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? All abstaining.
Thank you.
Motion
That's
carries.
a terrific,
Good
One
job.
did you-
that's a
did you abstain,
terrific
or-
move forward. Thank you.
I was supposed to abstain.
Abstain.
One abstention, so noted. Entertain a motion to close. You can vote on that.
Mr. Chairman, let's close that thing.
That thing?
East Main Street.
GCC 2014-09, DEP 1610783.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion, it's been seconded to close. Notice of intent for East Main Street. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All abstaining. Thank you.
Little bit.
All right.
Susan, I'm going to type this up when I get home and send it to you, okay?
Aye.
All right. It being on or after 7:21 and 7:22, I'm going to open up notice of intent for Tids Junkyard GCC 2007-11 and 2007-12, and the NOI for 11 was to complete the site remediation on Chapter 21E, and the 2007-12 was a revision of the plan to construct a 16-unit senior family housing development. If I could have the applicant and/or consultant, and if you could identify yourself for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Eric Johnson. I'm with Edge Environmental, and I represent the owner.
Okay. All right, let's kind of pick up where we left off here. And I think you had proposed, we had requested some additional sampling to close this out, and your client had made, you had made some recommendations?
Right. In our last meeting, we talked about collecting soil samples from the proposed conservation land from that area. My client has agreed to do that, but he also wished to provide a reminder, and that was that he met with representatives of the Concom and DEP in 2008 and agreed to the collection of 3 soil samples at that time. However, he has agreed to the collection and analysis of 2 soil samples for the 8 RCRA metals.
Just 2.
Mm-hmm.
What, did they spin a wheel?
Hmm?
They spin a wheel and pick a well?
No, that would be for soil samples.
Right.
Is there any reason only 2?
I believe it's cost driven. It's seen as a concession. I don't know whether or not that's means anything. It's you requested some sampling, and that's the,
Yeah, we did. I mean, I'm just thinking of, having an adequate number to be statistically significant. I mean, if you have 2 samples, one shows up with something, another one shows up with nothing, you're at the point where you gotta go resample because you don't have enough to really make a statistical call
at
one way or
that
the
point I
other.
would have 5 samples from that area, and then it would be on the lower side of a statistical Uh,
Right. I mean, a sample size of 2 isn't really much of a sample size. If we're doing biostatistics or any other kind of statistics, you know, I'm sure you know that, but.
You have to have 3 samples to do any kind of stats at all.
Well, that's really where I was driving in the record metals, that's all.
Right.
So, I mean, is there any way we could do 3, a minimum?
I can ask. Would 3 work for you?
How many, we asked for how many?
I don't think we specified originally.
Yeah.
We specified, thought we specified, did we specify, a size of a search? I don't remember. Okay.
I don't think we did.
I left here that you wanted soil sampling. That's what my notes say.
How would you pick the 2 sampling sites?
We could either lay down a grid
I mean, that would,
superimpose a grid and then do a random number generator. and-
that would be the normal way you would kind of do it. I mean, this would be the normal methodology of randomizing.
And it's quite a large area.
What's the acreage on that parcel?
I don't
26.
remember. That's the whole piece of land.
Okay.
This is
So-
just,
That's
this is just for
one,
this,
an
That's
area
why I
off to a
remember
side.
that number. So
Right.
what is the area?
this is the section that would
However,
be the donation section.
let's do remember that, you know, it's our water land.
Well,
So even though you're only going to be disturbing and building houses on a smaller parcel, the rest of it is uphill from our aquifer.
but it's not going to be used. It will remain in its natural state.
You know, the sampling here was just to make a determination that the property which was supposed to be conveyed isn't additionally contaminated, that the town wouldn't accept, because we've been, in the past, we've almost been burned by getting land.
Terribly sorry, I was confused. I thought we were talking about the area where the buildings were going to be constructed.
No, this was,
This
this-
is our donated land. I understand now. I'm sorry.
yeah, so we just didn't want to accept land that would,
Gotcha.
you know, all of a sudden we find out there's a, you know, a buried something or there's contaminated now under Superfund. We end up having to be a PRP to end up cleaning the thing up.
Got you.
Right.
So, how much do these things travel that we're testing for?
Well, obviously metals don't typically travel too far. Obviously, organics certainly can. And it depends on the soil and the water flow and a whole bunch of different things. And, I mean, there's a lot of parameters to figure out if something's gonna travel.
In terms of metals, in the more, I wrote a closure report for the site. I didn't incorporate older analytical data. I incorporated more recent groundwater data. There were 13 samples across the site that were analyzed for metals. The only metal that was detected was barium, and that was naturally occurring, and the detections were lower than the drinking water standard by 3 orders of magnitude
Okay.
Originally, there was some lead on the site early on.
in soil and the other
Correct.
where it was cleaned up.
Right, and there were some PCBs there and a whole bunch of other things too, but. And there should be high levels of arsenic there too.
As a guess.
Natural.
Were we concerned about the PCBs, et cetera? Now, what sort of things might we be concerned about that might move?
Well,
Because I remember there was a conversation about the metals. You were
Right,
interested in the metals. and there were
exactly,
other
because I mean,
things.
normally when you're trying to clear anything, you're gonna do your VOCs and your recreate metals, so you know, that kind of, if you leave something out, there's always gonna be a question, well, why didn't you do your metals, why didn't you do your organics? So these are the things that EPA, DEP looks for, to make a determination, you know, for the basic parameters of whether something's contaminated or not. I mean,
Did we make a request for VOC sampling?
Yes.
We did, and what was the proposal, what was your client's proposal for that?
To look for metals,
So not looking for VOCs?
not in soil, no.
Yeah, I thought the proposal did include some VOC sampling.
For groundwater.
Well, I mean, how deep are you looking for metals? I mean, if you're taking soils that have moisture in them, you could have organics in it as well. So you're sampling out of the existing wells.
All right, I think we might be mixing groundwater sampling with soil sampling in terms of some of what was discussed in the parameters. Do you want to just talk about soil first?
Yeah, well-
We can move to the groundwater, I don't,
Yeah, let's talk about soil first. I mean, from my perspective, if I'm sampling, I do them both. I mean, I do sampling outside of here too, and if I'm trying to clean something and want assurances that there's nothing in it, I do both. I don't decide not to sample one of the basic parameters. That's me.
okay. Samples were collected from this area, were included in a risk characterization, the risk characterization was reviewed by the Mass DEP people that do risk characterizations, and they agreed with the conclusions. My point is that the DEP accepted that information. They had more than ample opportunity to say, we think you need more samples, but they did not.
Well, actually, since I was dealing with this case since about 2000,
Yeah?
there had been resistance for many years to do the grid sampling that they wanted to be done. I
And
can
it's
go back and pull the records, and there was, no, we don't want to do grid sampling. DEP wanted it done, and there was years that went by that this wasn't done, so.
Okay, but where are we gonna go from here? That's what happened.
That's in the past. I understand it. So what I'm saying is, you're saying, well, DEP's good with this. Well, DEP got to a point where they finally accepted the level of sampling. And I'm trying to get to a point where we just feel comfortable that we've got closure, that we've looked at groundwater, we've looked at soil, and we feel comfortable, and there's nothing remaining, and we can move on. That's all.
To close this one out, to start with the construction.
So your client's proposing right now 2 soil samples.
From the area that was previously offered for donation.
Looking only for metals.
Yes.
And this is a cost-driven reason, not from a science perspective.
The science has been done.
I didn't quite hear you.
We believe the science has been completed.
Is that because of the large body of sampling that you
But they didn't
conducted
do-
that said that there was only barium in very small trace amounts? Is that the science you're referring
But a
to?
lot of sampling was not done on that parcel, correct?
3 samples.
That's it.
3 samples were collected from
Back
that part
in
of the parcel.
2008?
Right. My understanding is that that there was not further sampling done there because that was not used.
Well,
The
th-
footprint, the
So
footprint of
my-
the junkyard
ex-
was
ex-
smaller.
Exactly. Well, DEP's perspective was, since that wasn't really part of the construction, they weren't necessarily focused on that.
DEP's focus on the junkyard is to capture as much of it as they can. So that if it needs to be cleaned up, it is. It's to eliminate any risks.
Yeah, I understand that.
No, I'm just,
But they're focused,
it's just for discussion. I'm
Yeah,
not,
they're
please,
foc-
I'm not trying to lecture anybody on.
Their focus was on the junkyard portion, not outside so much, where there was, I mean, there was obviously, you never saw the site prior to it being cleaned up.
That's absolutely correct.
So are you saying that there's part of this parcel that the junkyard never did
Well,
not
I think there was
have
some,
the junkyard on
some,
it?
some debris made its way onto that parcel. I mean, in other words, there was a little bit of overflow. I think a few things were removed on more of the surface level on that, some of that land in the back. What, it wasn't really part of the junkyard per se.
Was that because of, there's a wetland in between that they would have to cross?
Yeah, I think, well, the line was very fuzzy about that. I mean, actually walking out there at the time, there were some pieces of cars out there, but it wasn't because that section, there was actually some wooded area back there. And, you know, the bulk of the cars were in one section in high stacks. And again, some debris made its way out to that way. You have to remember, this was not a really well-organized junkyard. It wasn't run like a
Gee
modern
whiz.
junkyard where they had, you know, great inventories and there was just stacks of cars everywhere. And pieces all over the place, dating back from, you know, probably the 20s or 30s on up to more modern stuff. So the concern was initially, you know, maybe something was over there, it was over there so long, it just kind of sunk into the ground, or there was some, you know, materials that leached into the soils in the junkyard per se and migrated underground into some of these other areas, et cetera. And, you know, my concern was that I just didn't want to accept property that, from a due diligence standpoint, we knew that wasn't clean.
Right. If there
Very
were,
simple.
if there were metals in the soil in an area that is never going to be disturbed and never, and would they travel? Would it actually be harmful, a concern for us?
Well, depends on the metal, depends on the concentration, depends on the hydrology. Metals don't travel as freely in soil as an organic will. And metals typically don't break down very easily. If you expose them to air, obviously you can oxidize them, but I mean,
Right.
in most cases, these are under the soil, then there's more of an anaerobic environment, so you're not gonna have that kind of oxidation breakdown.
If there were metals that we were concerned about, would they be in the soil or would they be near the surface?
I would think they'd be probably closer to the surface, but, I mean,
Agreed.
they're not gonna be 20 feet down.
Right. And so
That's where
they
you're
would
gonna-
be, you know, it would be, some might be oxidized because they are in the upper portion of the soil. Metals are not known to be good migrators. And that's, and to make that point, that's when I pointed out that there had been numerous groundwater samples collected across the site, and metals were not found to be a contaminant of concern here.
See, like lighter organics in soil, they can travel very readily in terms of, especially in a storm situation, and they're not gonna hang around very long. But heavier organics, like oils, they can stay in soils for a while. I mean, even if you look at PCBs, they can remain in soil and have a great resistance to breaking down.
So, should we focus on testing for those?
On organics?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I clearly want that for the water samples, most
Mhm.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But just as you know, again, if I were looking at my site or sites that I have responsibility for, and I've certainly done cleanup stuff, just to ensure that I don't have a problem, I would certainly specify both. Just so there's no question that someone comes back to me at some point and says, well, how come you didn't sample for this? How do you know? Prove to me that there's no material here. Okay, I can. I pull out my sampling data. I sample for the standard parameters for waste.
Generally, sampling is, in my experience, sampling is often driven by past use. So what are the possible past uses for this property, and then we would look at
Well, if you look at,
processes performed and what may have ended up in that
I mean,
location.
in a junkyard of this type, but if you would have seen it, anything could have been out there, and
Well,
literally.
well, that's, I don't doubt that. I mean, that's what junkyards, sorry, that's what junkyards are. They're places where we collect things. But if you look at the data, it was never a big problem. The individual, I don't know how good a manager the people or managers were that were running the place, but there was very little found in groundwater at any time. And the soil analytical data indicated that it was all closer to the surface, and that's what they removed that.
Well, I think in the limited soil samples that were taken, I mean, actually, early on, one of the LSPs actually stated on the record, his methodology with sampling was he only sampled where he visually saw staining on the ground. That, to me, doesn't make sense, but that's me.
That would be providing a worst-case scenario then, wouldn't it? I see,
Right, but if
I
you-
see a stain, so I analyze it. The probability of finding something there in a stained soil is greater than the probability of finding something in a soil that's not.
Right, but that is looking only for the worst-case scenario and not looking at,
That's true, but like you said, a grid was used, well, actually, multiple grids were used to collect samples on this property,
eventually, yeah. It took a while.
apparently.
So the last, as I recall, the last real sampling was done, what, 7 years ago?
88?
98. You said
I'm
88.
sorry.
88 even predates this
I-
area.
88.
I'm not sure where that keeps, stuff like that keeps coming out of me.
Yeah, this
you know,
dates back to about 2000, not quite 88. Not far away.
2008, thank you, sorry. Strike that, please.
And at that time, that's when you had the water sampling that indicated that barium was the only thing that had been found there, and it was very, very small trace amounts. Is that when
That was
done?
from 06 to 08.
06 to 08. Okay. I'm just concerned, I'm just curious how much that might have changed. Like how could it have changed?
Well, the only, it wouldn't, it could have changed only in the sense that if again, if you do a limited sample size, that I happen to miss this hotspot, here, and I sample all around, and statistically, I just happen to miss that random sample here that's hot. And, that's the nature of a random sample.
And was that sampling done on the part of the parcel we're talking about now, the donated part?
No, I think he said they did three.
Right, 3 soil samples
Oh,
were
okay.
collected from that area.
Different, all
They
different.
gridded out the junkyard per se, but the section out back, they had done 3, which was not the junkyard proper. If I'm remembering that correctly.
I need a
I-
map with,
Yeah.
I need a map with X's on it. Okay.
So again, I'm just looking from a due diligence standpoint that we have the assurances that there's not a problem, that everything's been cleaned up, including that parcel, that back parcel, and that we can move on.
How big is this parcel, and what would the donated parcel, and what would 2 sampling sites look like?
It'd be a location about this big
That
around.
big,
It's very small.
potentially a 10-acre site.
I forget how many acres
I was
it
thinking
is.
4 acres, but I'm sorry, I really don't recall that number at this
Right.
time.
But this, you would have to be exceptionally lucky to catch something you needed to pay attention to with 2 sampling sites over a 4-acre parcel. And are you
mean,
saying
that-
you would accept 3? So rather than doing it in a random way, would it be possible for us to do it in a targeted way? We know that there was debris in this area.
I think at this stage, it would be pretty hard to target.
Right.
So,
Because all the surface stuff has been pulled off.
And it's been growing.
And it's one thing if you see a car sticking out of the ground, you could say, yeah, let's look around the engine and see if we see any
Mhm.
oils or leads, et cetera, from batteries. And
Would any of these things be taken up by the plants that have been growing out there?
VOCs are not.
Certainly, metals can be uptake, certain metals can be uptake by plants.
But then
Right.
the vegetation dies and it goes back in the ground, right?
And then next season, the plants will.
It's taken up
yeah,
again.
Yeah.
So don't eat anything you find out there.
I think that was one of the
That was
one of the
yeah.
recommendations from the DEP,
Yeah.
that, people not have vegetable gardens out there. Why do they make those? Because they're not 100% sure either.
Well,
So
if
it's-
you look, the other, I believe a bunch of it has to do with the arsenic levels.
Right, because
Specifically.
before your time, there was some discussion about where the arsenic was coming from.
Hmm.
And
Natural
I think the applicant, a previous LSP, argued that it was from the incinerator over in Haverhill. He argued that arsenic in trash and other debris that was burned there was coming out the
Atmospheric
stack.
deposition,
That was their summation.
right. My understanding is the arsenic is much wider, is very widespread and it's native. or it's-
Especially in Georgetown. All right.
Yeah, the
So
other
it-
dump site we had, right, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's several in the town,
Natural.
but
Well,
arsenic.
there were samples collected from different locations in town.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, then DEP's been involved in several sites in town. Obviously, arsenic was used as a insecticide, herbicide, whatever, years ago too, so.
Lead arsenate?
But there is natural.
Oh, that sounds friendly to the human
It
ecosystem.
kills bugs on fruit.
Just don't
So-
make the fruit.
We need to agree this before, like, anything can be properly cleaned up
Well,
and
they come in-
actually progress made here, right?
Well,
Well, he came up with 2 test wells to try and close out the cleanup, correct?
That's what
They're
they're
proposing.
proposing too.
The
For-
cleanup
The
has
last
been-
thing that needs to be
The
done?
the cleanup is
the
done.
cleanup is done.
This is on the
Okay.
donation land, that's really what
Right.
we're
Right.
discussing
Yeah.
right now.
So this is the last thing we have to worry about.
No,
Oh.
then we have the construction.
No, I know, but in terms of contamination?
Yes, signed off,
Okay.
cleaned up, except.
And we still have to talk a little bit about the groundwater too, that's the next
Right.
part
We,
of this.
we would like to, the notice of intent has to be withdrawn. Period.
Right,
They both
I'm-
have to be withdrawn. That's
I'm the
over.
only sitting person who was on the hearing from the start.
However, the consent order has to be closed,
We have an enforcement order.
an enforcement
We have
order.
been operating under an enforcement order for about 14 years. Because, let's see, the order of conditions was violated in about 48 hours after it was issued. And it was an argument between actually the previous owner and the developer. They actually were literally going at each other with attorneys. Because one said, you told me to do it, no, I didn't, yes, you did. They actually, a lot of history there.
Yeah.
So basically, that's what we've been operating under as an enforcement order. So, you are correct. The order condition, the notice of intent has to be withdrawn because we don't have quorum, we can't vote on it. We could continue and this last phase under the, you certainly can withdraw the notice at this point because we're still operating under an enforcement order to close this final portion out.
The owner would really like to close that up and put this behind him.
Yeah, I think everyone would like to.
And move forward.
Right.
So, what do you wanna do? What do you think we should do? You know about this stuff.
Well, as I said, I mean, if I'm looking at a property, due diligence standpoint, I'd have to say if I was gonna buy a property and from an industrial property, we certainly would do more than 2 samples.
Right.
And, your lending institution would require that too. because they don't want to get burned, nobody wants to get burned. And, you know, if you want, once you acquire the property and it's contaminated under, you know, RCRA Superfund,
So what if
You
we
end
don't
up-
accept the donation?
excuse me?
What if we don't accept the donation, and then we're not responsible for it?
Well, I think, I think the goal was to have the property only from the perspective it helps protect it, because again, it's water district, water protection land, and, you know, you can keep activities off it. But again, from a due diligence standpoint, we obviously don't want to take land that's contaminated, because we'll end up having to clean up, and the taxpayers will have to pay for it if contamination is found later.
But the donated land is out back.
Correct.
There was not much out there
No,
as there was out
I'm
front.
trying to envision the site. I mean, you had the junkyard, then there was like
Bang,
a stream,
bang.
a wetland out kind of in the back, and then this land is kind of beyond
There might have
that.
been a scattered,
Yeah, there was some scattered debris, you know, a little bit of everything was out there, pieces of cars, fenders, and such. But the bulk of the cars were in the junkyard proper. But I think there were, you know, there were tires and things scattered all around the periphery of that site. It was a pretty scary place when you first went in there, when, the first time we went in there, I mean, these cars were stacked like 10 high, and
Saw it.
little narrow aisles between them, and you thought they were gonna fall on top of you. And they just were rotting into the ground, so,
So this donated land is beyond the wetland,
it's my recollection.
closer to the river
in the aquifer.
and the aquifer.
So, I mean, the donation was really from a protection standpoint.
More of a buffer.
So, excuse me.
I would rather,
You know, I guess from my perspective, for this long 14-year road,
for
it
two well, I don't think just
seems
two
kinda
test
crazy,
wells.
Okay.
obviously, I can't speak for the
Agree.
applicant, it seems just crazy that, the applicant just doesn't wanna take that step to just make this happen and provide, you know, do a little additional sampling and just close this thing out and make it go away. It just seems, you know, after 14 years of, you know, not showing up at hearings and all this kind of stuff, and, you know, sometimes if the economy was bad, we wouldn't hear from the applicant for 2 years, it'd just disappear. And then,
Now he's back.
now,
we
now.
kept rolling it.
I think,
So I'd like to close it out too.
I think that's the goal, and I think that's what we need to keep in mind or focus on.
But I don't think two wells, two test points are enough.
3,
How big is this, how big is it donated? Do we know? Acreage?
Yeah, do you have it?
I'm sorry, I don't recall that number.
It's I mean, seeing the original sites, it was more building, you know? I'd say at least 4 myself.
I mean, to my mind, it's kind of somewhat dependent on acreage. I mean, you're gonna wanna have a.
Right, yeah, yeah.
I mean, you don't need 50 samples, but you know, if it's 4 or 5 acres,
If he's saying it's clean, what's another couple?
I mean, if you suspect contamination on a site, and I said go out and do 2 samples,
Oh, no, there was contamination on the site, that's the thing.
you
On that part.
Well. in
you certainly
this
could
whole
miss big,
plot.
you certainly could miss big portions of it
Sure.
and not even
With
know
2
that.
samples, goodness.
Yeah.
How many would you
Well,
be
wait,
comfortable with
does it have any, what about all the other samples that were already collected
out there?
Well,
across the property?
Across the property.
yeah, but with that, in my mind, it proves that they've cleaned up that, but again, you could look at the migration issue. It just proves the point, as opposed to having any speculation of like, you know, is it or is it not, that's all.
So
is-
you were saying if there were 2 more samples, we would have 8 in total? Including the ones that were done in the past?
No. There are 3 were done in the past. That was an agreed to number of samples with DEP and the Concom. If we collect 2 more, that would be 5.
And those previous samples were done what, 6 years ago.
So we know where those samples were taken in the past, those 3. So we would be adding 2 more sample sites.
Do we?
We have a plan that shows where they were taken from. How well, you know, I could go back out and say, this is the spot. That would be difficult. It's over, you know, it's overgrown. I could get approximately to those locations. But other locations can be selected. It's not like we have to go back and redo them.
Well, obviously, I would choose sample sites other than ones that, in the spots that you already collected. As long as you can demonstrate and show that, you know, this is where this was taken, this was taken, et cetera.
I
Pretty
can use
close.
I can use a GPS.
Pretty close. I mean, the whole goal is that you don't have a 5-acre site, and we took 6 samples up in this corner, and we ignored all these others and said, I know nothing, and you.
Absolutely. We have offered, if you want to pick the spots, we don't have a problem
I
with
mean,
that.
again, my perspective is just due diligence that, you know, we've got the grid out, and, you know, in this acre, I've got a couple samples, in this acre, I've got a couple samples, so I have a good statistical understanding that, most likely, we've hit the goal here, and we didn't miss any big grids, and, it looks clean.
Okay, how many do you think we should have? How many more? We've had 3. You say those things don't typically travel a whole lot. How many more would you want?
Well, they were offering 2, I'd say 4 myself.
Mm-hmm.
I
Just
could-
so they can prove that the land is good.
I think you could live, I certainly could live with 4 added to what you already got out there. And, that, at least if you've got a few acre parcel, 3 or 4 acres, you've got an idea.
Okay.
You've got a good idea.
Okay, 4 samples.
4 samples.
Analysis.
For soil, I mean, again, from a due diligence standpoint, I'd like to see both metals and VOCs.
Especially VOCs.
You're not gonna find any VOCs now.
You're not going to? You think they're gone?
Yeah.
And
Evaporated or traveled?
Heavier
They've
VOCs?
evaporated.
Heavier VOCs
VOC.
like,
They do.
Okay,
like.
that's fine. I don't mind them evaporating, as long as I wasn't standing there.
You got a dirty pile of dirt, you just keep moving it around, it
Right.
cleans itself, but to
Pardon?
a point.
You know, heavier ones don't evaporate as readily.
No,
And don't.
lead.
Well, no, heavier organics don't. They don't break down as easily, too. Means other organics are gonna, over a period of time, break down.
So what are we talking about, organics? What sort of thing are we talking about? I'm sorry to be so ignorant, but.
Well, I mean, it could be hundreds of organics. I mean, they're, you know, you're not looking for just one organic.
But what sort of thing? I mean, are we talking about arsenic or PCBs or
No, we're talking about chemical. We're talking about
dioxins
chemicals.
or-
Benzene, methyl tertiary butyl ether, ethylbenzene, toluene, trimethylbenzenes, xylenes, things like that. There's a
Okay.
common list that is normally used. It's
The enes are always.
an 8260 is the EPA method that is commonly used.
Okay.
And there's a lot of enes in there, like benzene, because of the type of bonding that those chemicals have. They're more resistant to break down, and they last longer.
Okay, all right. And that would be groundwater testing.
Well, wait, we're talking about soil.
Soil.
I'm sorry, we went to VOCs and I thought they were a groundwater test.
It's both. You
Okay,
can
all right.
test for both.
Thank you, all right. So sorry.
Okay, so 4 samples for metals.
Right, and the metals, they typically are doing what's called TCLP.
No. That's to determine if something is a hazardous waste. That's if you have something that's a waste,
I
to
understand
take
that-
it to the next step.
I understand what it is.
It's not used for soil sampling unless you're trying to dispose of the stuff and find out whether or not it's a hazardous material.
It's used
or
to,
hazardous waste.
right, it's used to determine, it's supposed to simulate If anything leaches out of a material after simulating a year exposed to acid rain,
Acid rain, right.
toxic,
How about total VOCs or metals instead of TCLP? This, you're talking about going from about $150 a sample to about $1,200 a sample.
Oh, I'd rather have more samples.
But what are you sampling from? That's,
What's the difference in what the samples show you?
One will show you the total number of metals in the sample. The other will show you what can be leached out by a weak acidic solution, right?
That's correct.
And thus travel.
That's right. And be freed up.
forgotten me?
I mean, again, I understand it's different sampling, but that's, I mean, when you're looking at if you're looking to determine whether something was dumped there, that's what's done.
Totals are done. The common practice is to look for totals, not
But the-
T-clip.
Would the totals show us if something was traveling towards our wellhead?
No?
But this other kind would.
Would
Am
show
I
you
right?
that it might be traveling.
That's what it's designed to do.
Okay.
Because again, it rains out there, believe it or
Right.
not, on the junkyard, and if you put something in the ground, it kind of simulates what would happen to it.
Right.
Well, we got the Triclo in Rock Pond from the screw plant, about a quarter mile down the road. And so it does travel.
Trichloroethylene is an organic, not a metal.
But I'm just saying, just from almost
A
the
quarter of a
Ridgedale-
mile away, right?
Ridgedale to Rock Pond.
Wow.
Makes it-
How far away is it from the aquifer? It's kind of right there, right?
No, what I was talking about?
No,
Oh,
no, not that.
Okay.
This site we're talking about. It's like right there.
No, it's on the edge, borders are,
Zone 2.
Yeah,
Well,
it's very
it's-
close, actually, it's very close.
but Earth is one of the best filters there is, too.
Well, that's a good point.
Also, it's glacial till, which has a
Heard that
very,
before, too.
a very low permeability, which means water does not readily move through it. That's part of the saving grace on the junkyard. The stuff couldn't migrate deep into the ground.
That's interesting. So would it be more of a sheet flow situation or?
Sheet flow would occur across a parking lot, across a yard, through the woods.
I know
It
that
could
was the
occur.
wrong term, but you know what I mean, more of a surface flow, sort of.
Well, you certainly can have some,
That,
if you
that,
have
that would be, right, if we're inundated, you would have that.
you're gonna have that, especially if you have a light
Especially
organic.
when they go to do the construction part of it, but still, this is
Well,
just
that's
cleanup
what we
part.
put the conditions in to,
After they
guard
get to that
against,
construction
yeah.
part, yes.
right. I don't know what to
So,
do.
Aye?
so we're at 4 samples?
Aye?
4 samples, please.
Is this a negotiation? Since we are in an enforcement order. Now let's talk about groundwater.
4 samples, VOCs, metals. I need to know if you're firm on the T-clip. I rarely perform a T-clip. I've been doing this for 30 years.
Now, you're telling me the DEP didn't specify T-clip in the rest of the junkyard? Not at all?
I didn't see any analyses for T-clip on site characterization. To move material off the site, you would, like, say you had a high lead number, then you would then you would perform a T-clip.
Because
Well-
it's contaminated.
Well,
because
stuff was ultimately transported off-site.
Yes, but I don't have to perform a T-clip to transport it off-site. I can transport soil to asphalt batching plants or landfills
Depends
without
on
a
the level of-
T-clip.
Depends on the level of contamination, because you gotta, if it's gotta be manifested off-site, you gotta know what characteristics are.
Generally, soil's moved with a bill of lading unless it's
Unless it's
an
highly
F-
contaminated.
unless it's an F-listed waste, which is not something we're dealing with here.
All right, I'm thinking about the T-clip, so let's continue on with the groundwater.
Okay?
You're proposing, how many now?
Hang on a minute. Okay, on the groundwater, we would like to offer to sample 8 wells. You pick them. We offer to analyze for VOCs. Justification for the offer. There's 27, there were 13 samples analyzed for metals. The metals were all ND except for barium, and barium was 3 orders of magnitude lower than the drinking water standard. So we feel, and those wells are across the site, so we feel that there isn't a problem with metals migrating in groundwater. We also looked for polyaromatic hydrocarbons. There were 16 samples. They were all not detected. We looked for extractable petroleum hydrocarbons, which is oil. That's a Massachusetts designated analysis. 17 samples. They were all ND except for 2 wells, which had 1 compound each. The 2 compounds that were detected were 3 orders of magnitude below the drinking water standard.
Now, you're talking about the wells that were actually on the,
Across
across the
all,
site.
all the wells across the site. So my point is that of 65 samples, in 1 well we detected benzene above the standard twice, and the concentration in the well diminished over time, likely because of the cleanup or because there wasn't much there to begin with.
Probably due to maybe gasoline spillage.
Benzene, I wouldn't doubt that for a minute. But, you know, the gist of what I'm saying is that there have been numerous samples, and they have really, with the exception of 1 well on 2 occasions, they really haven't shown anything. So the last round of water met the drinking water standards in the wells that were sampled.
Was a donated land sample too, or of the 65 wells?
No.
Did they ever sample, actually, under the house?
Under the house. They sampled under the barn.
They did.
They definitely did, right? I think that was done twice.
No, the bond.
Or the garage, whatever it
That'd be
is.
an important place.
The house? No, I
No, the
don't.
barn would be important. So even including the barn, there were no, everything was way under the standard.
The barn was soil.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm
and
trying to hang on.
No, it's, there's a lot here,
Yeah.
you know? So we're offering to sample 8 wells. You can pick them. Originally, in our discussion, there was concern, it was expressed that the reason for the sampling was as a precaution to make sure that the groundwater
That's right.
was fine. There are a number of wells hydraulically down gradient, excuse me, from the areas that were cleaned up. Those were perimeter wells, and those were the ones that you were requesting sampling.
Well, that would make sense. Closer to the well fields, just to see what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
If it's traveling.
yeah,
Do you think 8 is a good number?
I think eight's probably reasonable. Eight is more, I think that's more reasonable than the soil from the other.
Okay.
Again, the more data, the better.
And please excuse me, that's a VOC sample? Am I right?
Yes,
Okay.
volatile organic compounds.
Got it right this
You're,
time.
you're getting there.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, again, the applicant can withdraw
Well, it has to
any,
anyway,
anytime.
right?
I mean, this is all under the enforcement order,
Right.
and they'd have to refile. Because you've got a new commissioner, so it couldn't
Just me and you.
vote or anything.
And I might have not even got the first wave of it.
So are we accepting 4 soil samples in the donated land and 8 groundwater wells sampled for VOCs?
I'd really like to pull how big that parcel is. I just don't remember how big it is. Because as I look at it from a due diligence standpoint, I'm trying to
Five acres.
look at how many samples per acre
4
type of
point
thing.
something. That might have been.
So 4 would take it up to 7 overall.
Yes. No.
Yeah, because there were
Three
3
previous.
original in 2008.
Yeah, I mean, if you go way back, we originally wanted the whole thing gridded out, everything, but it didn't happen
Mm.
like we wanted originally. We wanted, every, I forget the distance, but it was pretty tight. when we
Would you
tried.
drink the water out of our tap? Mr. Erickson?
What's that? Would I drink the water?
Just thought I'd try a different
course.
test.
Of course he will.
Of course he would.
No, I think 4 for the soil. And what'd you say, 8 for the water?
Yeah.
Considering the waters really didn't come up with any
Mm.
major hotspots or anything.
Would we entertain reducing the water sampling and asking them to do more soil sampling?
No, I think,
No, I don't want to
No.
reduce the water sampling.
Okay, just curious.
yeah, that's, if you knew the junkyard out back, it was really scattered here, there, or everywhere. It was woody.
Yeah.
There was definitely out front where they did do
I mean, if this were just a piece of land, yeah, you could say
Right.
not a problem, but I mean, hazardous activities were going on there, and, things were probably disposed of improperly. I mean, they may have been before the
And he could've
EPA
brought the truck out
existence.
back and just dumped everything out.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what is in a rotting vehicle? You have petroleum products, you have VOCs, you've got metals, lead from batteries, you've got,
And they had the fire.
there was a fire out there, I mean, so you've got,
And in the areas that they worked in where they drained the vehicles were sampled. In the area where the fire was held, those work areas were dug out.
Yes, but where it's still issues where, there could be possibilities of contamination. But I like the 4.
yeah, we just don't want to accept Love Canal 2, that's all. Or Sil Resin, or Sil
That
Resin
makes
3,
sense to me,
or BD Chemical,
So 4 soil, 8 groundwater is what we're asking for.
Well, that's what's on the table right now.
For right now.
Yeah.
Which would close out the cleanup and then they start on the construction part, which is a whole nother.
That's, he's gotta start over basically with that, cause
Yeah.
his plans won't even
But
come
it's just a
close to what the
stage, you
need
know.
is. Yes,
Yeah, we want this, we want it.
we would like
closed
to,
out.
that's
We'd like to
right,
see it cleaned and closed.
okay. Okay, so 4 samples, metals and VOCs, we're gonna get clarification on the T-clip, right?
Yes.
And groundwater, are you good with just VOCs?
No, I'd like to see metals in there too, for the groundwater. I mean, I'd like to see the same data for both.
Even though metals
They didn't find it.
were sampled and only barium was
Twice.
detected
In two,
out of
Barium
13
in two.
samples.
there were two.
There were just barium in 2 wells.
And it was 3 orders of magnitude below the,
Yes, that's
see, I was paying attention.
3 orders of magnitude less.
And how come we aren't showing any arsenic
Must be a light
in any of the
spot.
samples?
The wind must
It's
have moved
it's
the
not
other way.
it's not migrating. It's not
You
mobile.
didn't mention it in the soil samples either.
What's that?
You didn't mention it in the soil samples either. You did not mention arsenic being something that was found in the soil.
We discussed arsenic found in the soil here tonight and at another time.
But you'd indicated the only metal that was found was,
In groundwater, the only metal that was detected was barium. I have a table with results if you'd like to look at it. I'm
So if we only tested the groundwater for VOCs, could we ask them to do 5 soil samples? That would save money, and we already have evidence that it wouldn't perhaps be worthwhile testing for metals in the water. And would that save enough to bump us up to another soil sample? Which might be a better use of those funds.
well, I mean, cost aside, I mean, we should be looking at what's in the best interest of the residents and inhabitants of Georgetown in terms of cleanup, not trying to nickel and dime.
I agree, I was just wondering if it would be a persuasive compromise to ask for more sampling.
I do have one question though. They go into the construction mode, now they're scratching down all this earth and moving it around. Is that another,
Well, that's another hearing.
but is that a possibility of spreading? Or with
Well,
these testings,
The goal with this cleanup and the goal with this
would say
phase
the land's
is,
clean.
that's the whole point. In other words,
Okay.
if it isn't, then we shouldn't be, and the DEP shouldn't have signed off on it. I mean, that would be a,
no, I
But
just
they're
said-
not going to be working where we're testing right now anyway, that's the donated land that no
Correct.
work is being done on. And didn't you say a ton of testing was done up in the front
where
where they
everything-
are going to be?
Yep.
Okay,
more the,
I wouldn't say a ton, but enough to satisfy
Okay.
DEP.
more,
That was a negotiation too.
yeah.
that we lost out.
As I recall, DEP did want more samples, I think, and they eventually agreed on a set amount.
Right, it was like between 5 square feet and 25 square feet at one point, I remember. Okay. So do we want to send Mr. Erickson away with a request?
So, okay, we've got eight groundwater,
Mm-hmm. VOCs,
VOCs. I still like to see metals. We're talking about 4 soils for both.
okay.
And we can call that. Because we haven't had any new samples lately, have we?
And the final point of discussion we were talking about was whether the commission wanted, what I'd mentioned, T-CLIP, a toxic characteristic leaching procedure test, which he indicated obviously is more money. And again, the goal of that was to simulate if anything leaches out of the soil due to the exposure to acid rain from a toxicity standpoint.
I mean, that's like $4,800.
Just for the analyses.
Could we do?
That's just to hand when you hand the sample to the lab. There's already been probably over $100,000 worth of analyses on this property.
Well, consulting is
In this
expensive.
area? In this area?
Across the property as a whole.
I understand, but a lot of it has been done up the front, right? And we don't feel that enough has been done in this area. Am I right in saying that, in thinking that?
Well, I mean, the focus was where the bulk of the contamination was.
And where the construction will be.
Yes.
That's certainly a true statement.
So even though a lot of money has been spent on sampling so far, perhaps not in the area that we're discussing now.
Oh, the state of Massachusetts said that the work done out there was fine. These are people that are experts, and that's all they do.
It's up to you all, you know, I don't.
Would it make sense to do a T-clip in one out of the 4 wells? And if that showed something, then give us an indication.
I can certainly bring that back to the property owner.
You could ask him.
I like
Wow.
that. That's a good idea.
And
Do you
then,
think that's a good idea?
Not bad, not bad.
and then perhaps you might look into it as well. So how, winter's coming, how can we get resolution on this more quickly? Is there a way to work with Steve on this for final,
Absolutely,
final terms?
absolutely.
Okay.
And again, your client can withdraw at any point along the way. If we would be handling this, in my opinion, this final closure, what we're talking about right now, is still under the EO.
Sure.
Right,
And-
and that's what we're trying to get that done. Close the EO.
So in other words,
and then
you could do,
maybe close the EO and then click, click, click. That's the goal.
well, you could do it, you could withdraw them both right now.
He's, okay.
I mean,
I
it's semantics from my perspective. You could withdraw them tonight, and because we would still operate under the EO to do this. Or you could do them simultaneously. I mean, it really doesn't matter in that
But that doesn't get them
sense.
any closer to this.
No, I mean, we need, we need to get this to this.
Right.
Run on them numbers.
And again, he's right, if sampling, if we need to get the sampling done, it should be done before everything freezes up. Obviously,
Right.
it's not gonna be practical once you get
Right.
3 feet of snow out there.
In which case, I don't think we can leave that to Steve, who is going to be gone for another 3 weeks or so.
Oh, he's gone.
So, yeah, why don't you bring that to the applicant
Yeah.
and have him bounce that back to us, and we could, if it's amenable, we can go ahead on that, and then you can withdraw and we can close the EO.
Am I looking to reach out to you on this?
You could reach out to me or also contact Susan.
Okay.
Do we need to make any kind of motion to to enable you to make that call?
Don't think so.
No.
Okay,
don't
that's
need to.
fine.
Just back to him,
Just wondering.
back to his client.
Okay.
So we got 4, 8, and maybe a T-clip.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, I mean, I'm looking at this to protect the town,
Sure.
protect the town's
Okay.
interest, protect the resource, protect the inhabitants.
Yeah,
I mean, if we,
At
if we,
least
if
one, at
if
least
I were
one,
doing this
mean,
for, if I were doing this for my
cost
corporation,
perspective, but it-
and, you know, we do this stuff, if we're buying a new industrial site, whatever, it's a used site, it's been in service for umpteen years, darn well, we're gonna go out and do some sampling out there. Not just take someone's word, oh, don't worry about it, everything's clean.
Yeah.
You're gonna wanna sample.
right.
And you're gonna want good assurances. And so is your loaning institution, they're gonna wanna make sure you've done this, the due diligence, so they don't get stuck.
Right. And once this is done, then they can go ahead and do the part that they really want to do.
Then they can
break
drop
ground. Break ground.
drop some plans to consider doing what they want to do, but.
Oh, good point, but you know what I meant.
But, you know, the other thing, the only thing that you haven't mentioned that you guys should be aware of is that anytime we do any kind of assessment of a property, when I'm working for a client, there's usually a financial limitation. I haven't yet worked for somebody who just said, yeah, just do whatever you want. You have to balance cost against the data. And the difficulty that I have is that the regulatory body that governs cleanups in the state has already signed off on this. I understand you have concerns, but I don't understand if it's not my area of expertise, I don't practice in that.
Well, we also represent the DP, and I'm sure you're aware of that, right?
I am aware of that.
So we both have dual hats, and we represent wetlands, and so we still control that aspect of the site and always have, even when the DP was working this site. You've got the hazardous waste side and the wetland side. So we're just looking out for the due diligence for the town,
For the wetland side,
for the wetland side.
You know,
And the
And the
water.
water.
Two
And the
wellheads.
water,
And that's,
yeah.
the well
I mean,
side.
it's,
and, you know, to step back on the history here, the reason the DP got involved in the site is because we got them involved in the site. They weren't involved in the site at all. They were operating under an LSP who was not doing the job appropriately, and we had serious concerns and asked them to get involved.
No kidding. I read a lot of the
They
history. on
weren't
the
involved
site.
at all on the site. We insisted that they come out here because we were getting such a runaround, especially when the order of conditions was violated within 48 hours of being issued. And they started just digging things up and doing whatever they wanted, and we had major concerns.
well, the owner said he could do that.
So they were not involved in this site at all. This was not one that they started from the get-go. This was completely run under the LSP program, completely laissez-faire. And we had such major concerns that we insisted that they come out here. Again, to protect the resources and protect the residents and the water resources. That's a fact.
I don't doubt it. That's not something I was
Again,
aware of.
14 years is a long time. It's probably a record hearing. But again, there was you know, there'd be literally, sometimes a year would go by and we carried this here, and we could have denied the thing years ago, but our goal was to try and get it cleaned up. We could have denied this back in 2002 or 1, because things weren't being followed, and the applicant would just disappear out of hearings and be like, we haven't heard the applicant in 6 months, 8 months, sometimes almost a year. We call them, they wouldn't return calls, and be like, okay, fine, we're being nice guys, we're gonna carry the hearing open, and if you go back in our records, you'll find these hearings just opened and closed, continued, 6 months from now. Open and closed, continued, 6 months from now. I mean, it was really crazy. So this is a long road for us. And there's been, I don't know, probably at least six LSPs on this project, maybe more. There's been a lot.
4, yeah. Okay.
One of them lasted about one hearing. When the
Wonder if
person
we can
realized what they were
work out
getting
why.
into, and they came in like it was, like we weren't doing something, it's like they realized that the applicant didn't even let them know that there was an EO on the site, and they're coming in, well, why are there, there's been an EO open for umpteen years, oh.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we want it closed too. We want this to
clean.
brought to fruition, we want it
just wanna
closed, we
know
want it
it's
done right.
Clean.
It's been a long road. The commission feels at this point, why, not do that last little bit of due diligence to close this out properly, as opposed to just saying, finally got this off the table and just, walk away from it. That's really from my perspective,
Okay.
all we're looking for.
All right.
You're all set.
Hopefully a decision can be made shortly on this. Like,
I hope so.
very shortly. Well,
Thank
otherwise
you.
it's gonna linger. Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it.
And since we are still there, we still have to continue this, unless you want to
Mr.
draw, we will
Chairman.
continue these two hearings.
Do we have a,
And,
Just continue it. You only give me a minute on each one anyway.
well, it's been a long
If
minute.
only it
It-
took that long.
It has, but, wow,
Yeah.
a light night. Okay.
really?
Yeah, we have hours to go before we're
Mr. Chairman,
normally
I'd
out of
like
here.
to
Don't tell me that.
continue Tidd's Junkyard, GCC 2007-11 and 12 until December 11th,
We don't have anything.
January 15th?
No, I mean, December 11th is fine, we just don't have anything. You can do 7 o'clock, that's what I'm saying.
7 o'clock, December 11th, 2014.
And 7:00, you can do
Oh,
a, you can do
I
a
did
dual
do-
motion.
I
with
did do.
Okay,
dual, yeah.
so 7 o'clock and
11
7:01 or whatever?
7 o'clock, 7:01.
There's been a motion, and has it been seconded?
Second.
It's been a motion, it's been seconded to continue Tidd's Junkyard, GCC 2007-11 to 7 o'clock, and GCC 2007-12 to 7:01. Is any further discussion? Favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstained.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ought to have
Good
a-
luck.
ought to have a party after this thing is done.
Yeah.
Where, Camp 10? We're gonna need a detail.
Do we have any paperwork?
We do have paperwork.
What about
More
the
nails for Camp
Oh, we
Den.
do have the minutes.
The minutes
Do you wanna
from-
do the minutes? Well, did you guys all read the minutes? I didn't get any comments back.
I don't recall. I don't recall if I had any comments. Maybe we want to postpone those?
Okay.
So, we have a COC for 1 Spalding Road. This was a project that we had back in 2013. This is the one, if you guys remember, they wanted to put in a pool and patio around the pool.
Yep.
But it was very close to the wetland, it was like 57 feet from the wetland. That's what this one plan is. We have a couple plans. That's what we have. And I went out with, John Mativia, the building inspector, and we took a look at it, and it looks like the work was done as it was, proposed.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much just in-place replacement of the septic. The only thing is that the bank isn't completely stabilized. It's about an 8-foot drop from the top to the wetlands, and there's probably about 3, maybe 4 feet that are it's still pretty loose. It's been seeded, but it's not in a
Tight.
hole, yeah.
Mature.
Right. So, but John assured me that by the spring it would be fine, so it's your call what you wanna do with it.
Well, I think we could
Oh.
issue the order. Or actually, no, they're looking for COC.
Right.
Yeah, it's for a CSA.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we accept this.
Do we actually, I don't think we make motions to accept COCs, do we?
No, just motion to sign.
To issue a COC?
I think we just.
Motion to sign?
Well, it doesn't hurt to make one
Okay.
Make a
for the
motion
COC.
To accept COC on 1 Spalding Road, dated, we have a date on this? September 17th, 2014.
Second.
We have a motion for second to issue a COC for the property at 1 Spalding Road. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? Thank you. Any bills to pay?
Yep, we have some bills.
Any
so
mine?
We've got, no, none of yours. This is
Must
Friends of
be a
Camp
paycheck
Dennison,
coming.
Silver Line double hung windows.
Paycheck. Paycheck.
Oh, I also have another one. What is this one? Okay, this is the order of conditions for the Park and Rec. This is a reimbursement for, the Camp Den guys. He does like 3 months of bills at a time. And it's just the internet and phone. It's $240. Does he usually read the amounts?
Excuse me?
Does he usually read the
Who
amounts
said that?
for the bills?
Josh.
Yes.
Okay.
You're not
And
Josh.
this is, for Townsend Energy. And I'm not entirely clear, it looks like it's a, do they get both, oil and propane? It wasn't distinguished between the two, but he got 248.3 gallons on October 1st, and then 69.7 gallons on October 24th. So I think the lesser amount is propane, but I'm not 100% positive of that.
Yeah, unless they have a propane stove.
And then this is, SOS pump the tank at Camp Den for $255.
Standard, right?
This is Timberline, building supplies, and 60 bright finish, 1 pound, what is that, nails? Oh, that was a credit, actually. It was $355.23.
Did they straighten them out?
This is 2 months of light department bills, so it's a total of $337.30. And this is the water department for community gardens for $704.85.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, that's pretty high.
Wowie.
So high.
Here, you missed one.
The water up at community gardens.
Is there a leak?
Did you send them up to look? I don't know how to.
That does seem, I mean,
It does seem
that's
high.
for what how long a period? That seems pretty high.
Well,
It's for a year.
oh, it's for the whole year.
It's from October 1st of 2013 to October 1st, 2014.
$700.
That's a
Yeah,
lot.
it does seem high.
That does, we might have to have that checked out if there's.
Okay.
Oh, it might be
Be a leak or
leaking.
something.
All right, should I put Steve on that? Who should I put on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
Parker River Clean Water, this is the field nest hatchling monitoring, the Head Start setups. It was 21 hours for $525. And that's coming out of the, specialized turtle fund we
crazy.
have. And I think that's it. Yep. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, one more. This is Steve's stuff. Reimbursements for travel and phone, I think. And it's for $272.45.
It was just for mileage reimbursement
I think so.
Trip to New Zealand?
by car.
That's
Yes, it's
slightly
from,
impossible.
this is a cup of, I think you guys asked him to bring coffee one meeting.
It's
It's probably a 4-hour meeting, 4.5-hour meeting.
$700 for coffee.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I'll go get the coffee next week.
And come back in,
We're not here next
in a
week.
month? Yeah,
I
there you
thought
go.
we
That's
were,
it.
but we're not. How did you end up, did you turn on your TV and saw that we were here?
No, he called me.
Is
on
that
the
what
phone.
happened?
I got a message.
Oh, you did you?
Yeah, I was tied up doing some construction and next thing you know, I was like, it's Thursday.
Okay,
That's exactly what I was.
I'll entertain a motion to pay the bills as read by Susan.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest we pay the bills that Susan has read to us.
Second.
We have a motion, it's been seconded to pay the bills as read by Susan. And the only comment I have is to investigate that
The $700
water bill.
Definitely.
Second that too.
You got a third.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining. Thank you. Any other business? I'll entertain a motion to close.
Chairman, I make a motion, we close the meeting.
Second.
There's a
Second.
motion, it's been seconded to close the meeting.
Third, fourth.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All abstaining? Thank you.
Lovely.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Yes,
No,
wasn't it just, yeah?
Yes, thank you so much.
I need a ride home.